Jess here, and welcome back to another PLANMAS. And this time it's me. You probably recognize me if you watch my wax hauls. If you didn't, you didn't recognize me. I'm freshly made up for PLANMAS and not wax hauling. Shush. If you watch the wax hauls, shush. This is a fresh Halloween look for PLANMAS. Like, I'm filming this literally. It's November 22nd, and I'm doing some pre-PLANMAS stuff, and I just felt like dressing Halloween anyway, like, no matter the season. Got, like, this Dracula jumper from H&M, just showing off my chin. Anyway, a double chin. We live in life here. Okay, that's it. I'm very hyper from doing, like, 4 wax videos already, so this is gonna be fun. Because now we're going to be chatting. This video, as you saw on the title, is what I read in 2022, or what I read this year for 2022. And I didn't make a list, pre-list like I was supposed to. I'm stupid. And I'm filming with my phone, so this will be fun. I'm going to remember. All right, you were just seeing a very awkward cutoff because my alarm went off to take some medication. Sorry if I'm wobbling. It's just a weird tripod I have. It's on a it's just gonna wobble. I apologize. So to make use of this little time cut, I went and got my laptop so I can see the books that I've read. All right. So first of all, it's not gonna be all me talking to person. You're not just gonna be looking at me this whole time. I'm gonna intercut in a minute to the start of my reading journal. So I bought a beautiful reading journal from Archer and Olive, well, a beautiful journal, and I've made it into a reading journal. Let me put so this is what I got. It is an autumn one. It is, I've already messed it up. Autumn design with a beautiful, is it phonograph? It plays records. And it's beautiful autumn collection. And it's 8 by 8 inches, so I just thought the square would be fun. I was influenced by Plant-Based Bride. So yeah, so I'm gonna start intercutting very soon. Me starting the 2 spreads I wanna put in at the beginning. I'm gonna do like a cover page, and then I wanna do what I read in 2022, and a little page for my favorite books of 2022. So we're gonna talk about all that stuff. And I'm going to intercut between me and the reading journal setup, because I was planning just to film the setup and then do a voiceover, but I have a lot of feelings and emotions and thoughts about books. So I thought, okay, I'll film myself first talking, and then we'll cut in the journal stuff, so then the video will be long enough for all of my talking, and you'll also get the journaling stuff. So I may have already started. Anyway. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but let's see. So first we're going to talk about a bunch of the books I read in 2022, and I set myself up a Goodreads reading challenge this year to read 20 books. So last year I set it for 10, and I beat it, and I actually stopped at 10. I was like, all right, I'm done. I had just started back on sort of my reading again adventure, so a little back information on me if you're new here and you don't know, but I did my undergrad, I did a Bachelor of Arts, and I double majored in history and English. So I pretty much just did English and history classes. I also did art history and a little bit of European studies. So I did a lot of reading in uni, and then I went into graduate postgrad stuff, as we call it in Australia. I did history PhD, so I did a lot of reading for a lot of years. Overall, I was there 9 years doing that, so I was kind of burnt out on reading for a while, and then I finally got back into it really last year because I tried out audiobooks for the first time, and I realized audiobooks works so well for me. I never did any audiobooks during my university. I read everything on paper, and it worked then, but it doesn't work now for my life. And audiobooks have just been a godsend. other than novellas, so if anything's like 6 hours and under, I just get a Kindle version or whatever. But I read an audiobook, and I know there's some people out there who don't think audiobook is reading, but it is. It's someone reading you a story, which is actually more natural than reading written books, because obviously the history of people is all about oral history, oral stories, sitting around the campfire and telling each other stories, and that's what audiobooks really are for me. And my mind is video and picture. So when I listen to someone reading me a book, I can see it in my mind, and I really enjoy that. And finally, there's nothing better than reading while in the dark, lying down, my eyes closed, my face in my pillow, listen to a book. I love it. I love it. And also, I have one of those minds where I can definitely multitask as long as I'm not reading like words if I'm looking at words on the screen, then I kind of lose the audiobook. But when I'm drawing, which is my main work, I can listen to a book. So I get through a lot more books through audiobooks, and I found that last year, and it was great. So I set myself up for 20 books this year, and I read, I'm going to say 21.5 right now. It's the end of November, and I have 6 hours left of The Lost Metal, which is the last current Mistborn series book. So we're going to go over that near the end, because I will say the theme of this year was Brandon Sanderson. So I think it was in December last year. Samantha plans and reads. Hey girl, if you're watching this, she's definitely, I feel like, really got everyone reading in the planning community. And since she really came back, and I'm so glad for that. I love listening to her talk about books, because, she is a librarian, so she has even more information than me, just a silly English grad. But she was rereading, I think in December last year, the Mistborn first trilogy, and she said, how she described the plot of like the empire. What if the evil Dark Lord wins, and this is 1,000 years of their empire, and then obviously there's certain parts of people who are not happy with that, and kind of try to go against it. And I thought that sounds really cool. I love me a fantasy, and I love, a different kind of story. And so I was like, hey, Luck, to my partner, Luck, I was like, hey, this book sounds cool. I want to get it. And they're like, oh my God, I read Brandon Sanderson, Jess. I've been reading the Stormlight archive, you dum-dum. And that's his Brando. I'm just calling him Brando from now on. Brando's other fantasy sect. So he has a whole Cosmere universe, and all his books are connected. But this is like, Stormlight is his big epic series. He's written 4 so far, and he plans 10. But the 5th one is supposed to be like the end of this arc, which he's just started the 5th one. I'm very excited. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in 2 years, we'll have the end of that. But they were already reading Stormlight Archive. I think they were just about up to book 4, Rhythm of War. So he's like, my partner's like, you should try it, Brandon out. You'll like them. And so I was like, all right, but I'm going to start on Mistborn because it sounds like an easier read. So then I read all the Anyway, so that kind of started it. I read Mistborn and I read Stormlight. So that's a lot of the books this year. So we'll get into that in a minute. I think we'll talk about it at the end, because I will say now my favorite books of this year were, I couldn't pick one book. It had to be all 4 Stormlight Archive books. And we'll get into that in detail later, once we've talked about the other books. Because that's what you're here for. We're doing a book chat, all right? So that was the main thing of this year, and then we'll talk about those. But I did read some other stuff. It wasn't just Brando. I did read, first I started January off with an autobiography, because I do like to sprinkle those in. And I got Mel Brooks, All About Me, and this is like his life and show business. And I love Mel Brooks. I grew up loving his films. I think Robin Hood, Merry Men in Tights was always my favorite. I actually recorded it on VHS off the TV. So when I watch it now, even, like on streaming. I know exactly when all the commercials are gonna come on because of that video. Because I taped it off the TV, so it always makes me laugh. But I love Men in Tights, and then I also love Young Frankenstein. I always love that one. And obviously, I just love all his films, honestly. The only one I've never seen is Dead and Loving It. And I do have a copy of it, so I'm going to have to watch it, obviously. I think it's supposed to be, like, not the best one, but it's Leslie Nielsen. So Nielsen, whom I also adore. I just love that kind of silly humor that Leslie and Mel Brooks do. I'm into it. I'm a comedy girl, so I was like, all right, I want to listen to this book, and the audiobook's great because it's read by Mel, and he's like 98, so he just wrote this book and audio recorded it at 98, and I was just really into that. And you know, it's supposed to be his life in show business, but he starts off as a kid, and sort of he kind of goes on about his life as a kid, like a poor kid in, was it Brooklyn? In New York, and growing up, and how he learned to fall in love with show business and movies, and especially Broadway theater. He was really into as a kid, and it was just kind of fascinating to hear about like what a childhood was like in the late 20s, early 30s, I think it was. I think he's like 1923 or something, kind of the same year that my papa was born. Probably also my grandpa. I have my grandpa and my papa, but sadly they're both gone. But all my grandparents have passed on. But I think it makes me think of them. But I thought it was like, I don't know, it was fascinating to hear about his childhood and how cheap everything was. And seeing movies and theater. And then he goes up and, you know, he talks about being in World War II and what he did there. And he actually, at the end of it, he actually was part of like a show business part where he was entertaining the troops for the last lot of it. But some great stories in there too. And then also like meeting his wife and getting into show business. And then he kind of has chapters about every single like movie and stuff that he did, but also the TV show that he did with, I can't remember his name, but Carl Reiner was in it too. I can't remember the main guy. Anyway, I looked up some clips, and it's very old-fashioned, but it's actually still pretty funny. If you, like, discard the whole, like, wife is after you kind of, wife is sick of your stuff kind of jokes, but otherwise it's actually pretty funny for being old. Anyway, and then every chapter in every movie, and he kind of, like, goes on the writing process and the filming and acknowledging a lot of people. Like, it's kind of like, you know, he's looking over his life in show business, and he talks about all these people, and he has stories about his legendary wife, Anne Bancroft. Ugh, what a legend. It's very sad. I totally cried at one part where he's talking about after she died. Anyway, it was a very good book, and it made me want to go watch all the movies. So I did rewatch some of the movies like High Anxiety. Yeah, so I enjoyed that. If you want to like just a nice autobiography of an old silly man telling you stories about show business, I don't know, it's cute. I like it. And then it was very well written, I think. And then what else? Brandon Sanderson for a lot of the year. And then I broke it up with, then I finished Stormlight Archive and Mistborn. So I read the book The Terror by Dan Simmons. I'm just burping, as I have done in all these videos. The Terror. So I watched the TV adaptation. It's season 1 of The Terror. It's called The Terror. Season 2 is about something completely different because it's supposed to be like an anthology series, and then they kind of gave up on it. And I only really like season 1, which is based on the book The Terror. And it's based on the real Franklin expedition that was lost in the Arctic. They were trying to find the Northwest Passage. And they only recently, in the last few years, found both ships. The ships are Erebus and Terror, which is like the name of the Terror for a boat is hilarious. Anyway, I loved the show, and if I'm going to say anything, you don't have to read the book, just watch the show. The show is so great. It leaves out a lot of the weird stuff that's in the book, and we'll go into that in a second. And I might get, I might lose monetization when I talk about it because this book, my friends, this book, it is long and I did enjoy it. Like, and especially after watching the show because I can imagine each character as the actor. And the captain of the Terror is played by Jared Harris, who is a legend. Like, what is your, like, okay, with Jared Harris, he's not objectively attractive physically, but my God, that man is attractive. His charisma, his voice, his acting. I love Jared Harris. I love him in everything he does. Anyway, great in Mad Men, great in The Terror, great in Chernobyl. Love him. So definitely watch that, especially if you have a hankering for Jared Harris. And also, one of the actors who plays, I think his name is Cornelius. So when he was described in the book, I was like, oh my God, the actor's spot on. Like, it's literally him. Like, they describe him as being like rat-faced, and the actor is in the most delightful way. Like, he's kind of the bad guy. And as much as a bad guy, in a world where they are dying from starvation and cold and a big old spiritual bear is hunting them. That's the main thing. They're trapped in the ice in the Arctic, which actually happened in real life. And then in this book, he kind of like goes into the fiction of how they may have perished because it is a complete mystery. We don't know how. We have some remains of like 30 of them, but there was like 200 of them. Who knows what happened to them, really? Well, other than the standard cold and starvation, maybe lead poisoning, but I think that's kind of being debunked. The TV show goes into the lead poisoning aspect, but I think that's mostly debunked. But in this book, he's like, they're hunted by a mystical giant polar bear creature. And he like just terrorizes them because it's a terror. And it's great. I really enjoy it. It's super cold. You know, you got the snow and the ice and you got the mystery, you got all these stupid men being stupid. There's a really sweet side story of like two gay men, and one of the gay men, he kind of like, they knew each other on other boats, like they did other expeditions together, and that's how they sort of grew to know each other. And one of them's a lot older, so he's kind of like a gay mentor. They have a very sweet, soft love story, which I enjoyed. Because then you get the whole other stuff, which is, I've never read a book that described male anatomy and female anatomy so much, in so much detail. Like, oh my God. Like, these men are having, here's where I'm going to demonetize, but they're having, and please turn this off if there are children listening, if you don't want them, if they don't know these kind of functions. It's not going to be like super graphic, but I'm about to say the E word. They constantly had erections. And I'm like, Dad, what are you doing to me? Why is he watching this spiritual mystical bear throat singing into a woman and you're getting an erection right now? Like, the character's point of view, he's like, oh my God, I'm turned on. I'm like, why? Why is this happening? And then there's a whole scene where it's a flashback with the Captain Frazier, where he's like, so none of these men have ever been with a woman other than a prostitute from the sounds of it. I understand that they're 1800 sailors and expeditioners, so they go on these big trips, but like, what the heck? And he has this whole flashback where he's really into this one woman, and they go swimming in Australia, in Tasmania, in a platypus pool. And then they kind of like start doing it, kind of, but manually, like not actually doing it, just like hands and stuff. And he's describing it, and everything's soft, and everything's wet, and everything's tumescent. And I'm like, oh my God, what? And then, other than the erections that constantly happen for no reason, at least 5 different women's pubic area is described in detail, like the amount of hair, the type, the texture, like the type of hair, like the color, and like, I'm like, why? Why, Dan? Couldn't you just make this a fun little seafaring venture? Why does it have to have all this stuff in it? And then I apologize. We're going to stop talking about that stuff now. It is now safe. I just had to tell you, like, that's exactly what he was blabbing on about. I was like, why? Why, Dan? And like, I still enjoyed it other than those bits. But that's, like, the stuff that they took out of the TV show. Like, there's none of that kind of stuff in the TV show. None of those flashbacks. Which is nice. I'll be honest. And then, like, it's a lot more streamlined, the TV show, obviously. And then what else? You're also going to say, like, the point of views of these characters is that they're men in the 1800s. They're white men. And they do not say nice things about native, well, not native. In Canada, they're Inuit or Indigenous Canadians. They don't have great stuff to say about them. And obviously, he's making this more historically accurate because Simmons is into that stuff. So you do have to take that with a grain of salt that he is writing them that way. And it's not meant to be like a progressive retelling. This is sort of like him thinking about this sort of the terror of being in the Arctic wilderness stuck. And otherwise, just watch the TV show. The book's fine. Like, I'll probably check out his other books. He has one about Jack the Ripper, which is interesting. So maybe. There's probably going to be a lot of body parts in that too, I can just tell already. But yeah, that's all I want to say. I wanted to do a little rant about that because while I was reading it, I was like, why? Anyway, such is life. Watch the TV show, please, and not read the book. But read the book if you want. I don't care. And then to carry on my like non-fantasy singular books, I reread A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. And this was one of my favorite books that I read in uni for my modernisms class. One of my favorite books of all time. I feel like I had a better experience reading it as a book rather than audiobook, but it was narrated by Colin Farrell. You know, the Irish actor guy. And he had a really nice voice. I did really enjoy that. And it was good. I still really enjoyed it. It's not going to be for everyone, James Joyce, obviously, but I really love, it's kind of related to like my studies, is there's a lot of Catholic stuff in it and a lot of like Catholic guilt. I'm not Catholic or anything, but I find that really fascinating, and you read through a slog of it, honestly. Like, he's like, I'm going to hell, I'm doing everything wrong, and then you have this amazing catharsis scene where he's at a beach, and just the language, like, I would say I'm a really big fan of flowery prose. I really love when writers play with language, which I guess is ironic with Brando, but he's a very straightforward writer. We'll go to that in a minute, but yeah, it's just so beautiful, and the catharsis is real. Like, and the point of this catharsis is that he's realizing, I'm going to be an artist. I don't have to feel this weight of sin or guilt. Like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. And he's at the beach, and like the clouds are rolling in, and there's a girl he's watching in the water, and just, oh my God, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I feel like it was worth it for that, honestly. And it's interesting because the way he writes it, obviously it's a modern book, and he kind of writes it as you go through his life and his different ages. The writing changes as his like brain matures. So it starts off with almost like baby speak, goo goo gaga stuff, because he's like a young kid. And then as he gets older, the writing becomes more mature and more, he has more adult thoughts and words. So I thought that was also interesting. I didn't pick that up on the first time I read it, but I enjoyed that. Oh my God, now my laptop is going to die soon. Gosh. We'll quickly finish up about what else you read, and we'll get into Brando, okay? So then I reread I read a spooky books for Christmas. I guess you can read A Christmas Carol as a spooky book for Christmas, but for Halloween, October, I reread Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And I read this as a normal written book on paper physical, whatever. Back in uni, I did a Gothic literature class, and I really enjoyed it back then. I was like, you know what, I kind of want to reread it because it was narrated by Dan Stevens, this audiobook. I love Dan Stevens. I've never watched Downton Abbey, which is like his main thing. And I know I think he's a very popular character on that. I'm not really into Downton Abbey from the thoughts of it because it kind of like makes rich people look good. And it was created by a Tory lord, literally. So he's kind of got a bias there, and he's got a thing going on there, I think, about trying to get people to enjoy rich old English people. But anyway, try to make them sound more altruistic when they actually are. And I feel like there's a bit of he's got something going on in that show. But so I haven't checked it out because I'm a proletariat. But I have heard people love Dan Stevens in it, and he's kind of chubby in it, chubby and cute. But he's pretty dang hot now. And Dan Stevens, like, he was in the live action Beauty and the Beast, which is unfortunate. But he's also in the Eurovision movie, which is great in that. And I really loved him he does a movie where he plays Charles Dickens trying to write A Christmas Carol. So if you're looking for a different film for Christmas, that could be it. But I really like his voice. He's English, so you know. I like English narrators a bit more than American, but I do put up with Americans. It depends on the kind of American. Some of them are much cleaner than others. But, what was I going to say? His narration is really good. He is actually like really into English and literature. He actually is a part-time editor. And when he has time, I think, he edits an English journal. So he's into books, and I think that his narration really brings that across. He does a really hot voice for Victor Frankenstein. Not great, but because Victor Frankenstein's obviously the actual monster in this book. A very simplified argument about that, though, to be honest. I think it's a bit more complex than that. Because he has his own, obviously this is a point of view of him, so mostly because it's story within a story within a story. And most of the story is Victor Frankenstein's point of view, but I don't know, I think it's a bit more complex and he's evil. But obviously the monster he creates is not evil, but also kind of is. He makes bad choices, but he's also was treated. There's a lot of Victorian moralism in this, I think. Like, early Victorian. Like, obviously, this is just before Victorian period. But there's this sort of feeling about how society and people turn others to crime, and not so much they're just a bad person. So, nature versus nurture. So there's a lot of that as well, which is interesting. And then his monster is really nice. He's a very endearing, soft voice, kind of wailing. He's very sad, and I enjoy the voices that he did. So I liked the Frankenstein. Anyway, I was going to reread. And then I read a new one called Something Wicked This Way Comes from Ray Bradbury, and I'd never read any Ray. And at first it started, so this one had a kind of weird American narrator. Like, it went with the book, but I was like, oh my gosh, what am I listening to? And it kind of started, I spent the first quarter of the book like, what is happening? I'm so confused. Like, he also has very beautiful, flowery language. Like, the way he describes stuff, like you have to get used to it. But once I got used to it, it was beautiful, beautiful variety. I do want to read more Ray Bradbury for sure. Because the writing is gorgeous, just very poetic, I will say. I think it's very poetic. The hints of modernism in it too, because it's almost abstract, some of it, and you're just like, what's happening right now? Like, I'm on a journey. And it started off, I'm like, okay, this is about 13-year-old kids. I'm not so interested in being in kids' minds anymore, or even young teens, but it was interesting. And then it got a bit creepy. It got creepy, man. It got creepy. Like, it's about an evil circus. Like, it's a weird magical circus comes into town, and there's a weird carousel that could change. Like, if you go round and round on it, if it goes one way, you get older like 1 year each round, and if it goes the other way, you lose years and get younger. That's creepy. And like I actually had to like look it up a little bit just to see a little bit further into the plot to see if something would happen that I really couldn't handle. Like there's some kind of horror stuff that I just don't like, and just it gives me the hoobie-jibbers. And luckily it wasn't going that way, so I continued reading, and it ended up really nice. I did enjoy it. It's very much a story about young boys and old men. Yeah, so it kind of centers on that, but I still really enjoyed it. Other than being creeped the hell out, like it's kind of like I feel like it was a big inspiration for American Horror Story Freak Show season, you know, like the circus, because it kind of focuses on the freaks, which is, you know, but some of them are so like, oh, it grossed me out. Just the feeling of this, like ordinary people getting screwed over, and that was the worst part for me. Like the, like what happens to the traveling salesman and their teacher. I'm just like, no, creepy. I don't like this. No, get away. So that scared me. So that was like the point of why reading it. So otherwise, very enjoyable. Yeah, I enjoyed it. But yeah, it creeped me the heck out, and it wasn't even like overtly scary, but it scared me. Anyway, so those are like my normal books, and then I read some fantasy. So one of fantasy that I just finished reading, which I feel like everyone read last year, which was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. And I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I've been trying to, I'm not great with star systems because I don't really know, but I gave it 4 because I'm like, I won't reread it. Like, I think 5 would be a reread. Like, I would reread it. But 4, I think it was good. It was solid. But I do understand that the pacing issues that people were talking about. Basically, the last half of the story was super rushed. Because it's a one-off book, it should have been a duology. So the last story arc could actually be fleshed out and be really important. Basically, there's a big bad, and the big bad is done with in like 3 pages at the end, because it feels like she had to rush, to be honest, to keep within a good, it was a long book, and then, I don't know, it wasn't long enough for what she really wanted to talk about, or maybe the earlier parts should have been a bit more edited. But I did enjoy the characters, and I really enjoyed the mythology. I really enjoyed like the main like religion that was really discussed in it was based on chivalry, and so I really enjoyed that because I love knights and chivalry like a crazy person, like all us nerds. But I really enjoyed that stuff, and I did enjoy the characters in the end, and I really liked how some of them were really gray. Like we were in their point of view, and they weren't a good person. Like they made very selfish decisions. And I liked that. They are redeemed in the end, and I feel like having a second book would have redeemed them better. Like there needed to be more work on that person. But otherwise, yeah, if it was a duology, I think it would have been 5 stars because I really did enjoy the world and the characters, and I wish more of it was a bit fleshed out. But otherwise, still a very enjoyable book. And then I read the first 3 books of The Wheel of Time. So I'll very quickly cover these because I hope to try and get through all 14 books and maybe finish it next year or the year after. And then I'll really talk, if I'm still on YouTube and stuff, I'll really talk about The Wheel of Time. But first I'll say, I know why people struggle with these books because they're pretty old-fashioned. They're between like Lord of the Rings and like current fantasy, and it's just a weird time. They're a bit old-fashioned. Oh my god, some of the things these boys say in this book, I'm just like, shut the hell up. Like they're all like, oh, women are so dumb sometimes, and I'm just like, shut the hell up. The women in this book are so much better than you. Like, I hate Matt. Like, Matt can go to hell. I think the only boy I really like is Perrin, because he seems sweet. And I picture the actor from the TV show, because I have watched the TV show, the first season that came out last year. I did watch that, because my partner Locke has read Wheel of Time too, but they quit on book 5. So we'll see how I do when I get to book 5. Because I think because it's 14 books, it kind of meanders into a lot of characters, a lot of story. Doesn't always stick to the original story, I believe, that I've read. So it'll be interesting. And the world is like, this is one of the fantasy worlds where I would never want to live in it. Like some of these, I don't understand some of these people. Like it's horrible. Like the what are they? Children of Light or something? Screw the hell out of that. They suck. But and they're made even worse in the TV show, honestly. Like they kind of scared me in the TV show. They're a lot less scary, a lot less menacing, but oh my god, something that made me feel sick inside in my stomach were, oh my god, what are they called? I can't remember what they're called, but they kidnap women who may have magical powers and they enslave them. And anything about enslavement, oh my god, it riles me up. It disgusts me, makes me feel so sick. I hate it. And you're in the point of view of a character who's been enslaved and they're freaking out. And I'm just like, I'm freaking out with you. Like, no. I have a very strong sense of justice, and enslavement pisses me off. I don't like it. I don't like it. And so I felt sick and horrible. I'm like, please end. Please get saved. So a lot of the world is very stressful. Like yeah. So it is a struggle, but I am enjoying it. Despite that, I enjoy that it kind of like pushes me. Like like I have to struggle through the book. I kind of am enjoying that actual part of it. So I have a feeling like I want to finish all 14 to see this through and see these characters through. Also, the only people keeping this world safe and like from getting completely destroyed are the Aes Sedai, and everybody hates them, including a lot of the point of view characters, almost all of them. I'm like, shut the hell up. The Aes Sedai are the only reason why you're not dead. Why do you all hate the Aes? Oh my god. Ooh, this world. And like he's written it like, the thing with Robert Jordan is he purposely wrote it as these are people who unlike Lord of the Rings, where Frodo's like, okay, I'm gonna go do this, I have to do this for the better of the world, I have to save everybody. The characters here are like, nah, I'm forced to do this and I'm unhappy and I hate you all and how dare you. I don't want to do this, I want to go home. Actually, no, I can never go home because the world is much cooler than my silly hometown, but also I don't want to do this. And I'm like, just do it. Be a hero, please. So I'm struggling, but it's a happy struggle. I'm enjoying it. I need to see this through. I want to see it. And I know, like, you know, in fantasy memes, Rand is part of like the pantheon of the big boys. He's the dragon reborn man. So you got to see him. I want to see him be the dragon instead of him being like, I'm not the dragon. Shut up. My dad is my real dad. Shut up. I'm like, he ain't your dad. But he raised you, so he is your dad, Rand. Chill. I am very animated about the Wheel of Time. Okay. That means now we're 37 minutes in, so it's going to be like an hour-long video, and I apologize, but if you were here for the book rants, you got them. So, Brand new Sanderson. First of all, Mistborn, which I also love, but Stormlight Archive just kind of like edged over the top of Mistborn for me, but I also really love the Mistborn. So there's 2 eras in it so far. There's the first 3 books, and then 300 years later, in the same world, you have the next, now 4 books. I am halfway through the very last book, so I can't comment on how era 2 ends because I'm 6 hours away from the end. But I'm really enjoying it so far. So first of all, the first trilogy, the emotions. I was like, okay, now I see. Now I see why people read Brando, because the emotional roller coaster the twists, the turns, just the epic moments, literal tears on my face. A lot of the times I was in bed going like this, like literally like holding my head like, ah, like in bits. I was like, oh my God, especially when you get to an end. Like, okay, so in my history thesis, I was really proud of all of my chapter conclusions and my conclusion to my thesis, because I was like, let's write a conclusion, which will tear your mind apart. Like, I love writing like epic conclusions, and that's what Brando does. Like, every end, I'm just like, ah, like, amazing. Especially, I will say the end of the second Mistborn book. God, what was it called? I have it on The Well of Ascension. Where, like, no spoilers here, but if you read it, you know, the end of Well of Ascension, you're just like, excuse me? What? Everything I knew was wrong? And now this is happening? Anyway. So, yeah, love that. And when I finished the trilogy and the end of the story, oh man, all I can really describe it as is bittersweet. It's hopeful, but it's very sad. And it's just, I finished reading it. Audible said, thank you for reading this Audible production. And then it ended. And then I was just like, I just sat there for a second. And then just tears came to my face. And I just cried. I cried for like a couple of minutes. I'm like, what? Wow. Oh, okay. And then the next day I actually reread the last 2 chapters because I needed to hear that again without being like wrapped up in the end of the book. So good. And then we have Mistborn, Era 2, set 300 years later, Wax and Wane, Steris and Mercy and Milan, the craziest, wackiest, ridiculous, chaotic group you've ever heard of. They're insane, and I love them. I love them. They're sweet, sweet babies, but I love how, like, they're on their adventures. They're fighting bad guys. They're burning down places. They're making a mess. And then they'll just stop and, like, Wayne will be like, say something ridiculous, and Wax will be like, what the heck are you talking about, Wayne? And Wayne's like, you know, when you set a fire, you throw a window out. You throw a cat out a window. And then people are like, oh, okay, you're saying... You know, then people don't know that you're the one who set the fire. You're trying to save the cat from the fire. And then Wayne's like, you threw a cat out a window? What's wrong with you, Wayne? And Wayne's like, yeah. Also, I farted on your office chair, Wayne. Wax. And then Wax is like, why? My office chair. Anyway. I'm going on, but those characters are like, please. You guys are sweet puppy cinnamon rolls, and I love you all. Especially the women. Mercy and Steris are great. And I will say in the last book, the 4th book, you get more points of views with both of them, and I love it. I love it. And now we get to my very favorite books. But we're at 41 minutes. I'll just say, I love Stormlight Archive. It's an epic fantasy. It's set on a really cool planet that is kind of like crustaceous. And so there are big crabs, boop, 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 giant crabs, and then big like bug crab creatures that like to kill you. And so no dragons or anything. This is a crab world, and we love crabs, all right? And we also love when the environment is also crustaceous, and like the grass blades, when you walk over it, like go back and like descend like coral reefs. They like hide into their little holes in the ground, and then they come back up and like, oh, I'm grass. And also there are spirits called Sprens, which are spirits of everything in the world. So like say you see a fire, there's a bunch of little dudes, little wacky, weirdo little dudes dancing in the fire being like, fire, I'm a fire spirit. Ooh. And not everyone can see them, but they're there. And they're in rain, and they're also in creativity. So like one character loves to draw, and she'll be really into drawing, and then little creative Spren will just sprout out around her and be like, yes, draw, creativity. And she's all like, get the heck away from me. I want to live in this world. It's not a nice world either. Most fantasy worlds aren't. I think the ultimate fantasy world is Middle Earth. Would definitely live there. But I also kind of love Roshar. So despite all its issues, and like the Alethi people are like the worst people in a match ever. Like not as bad as Will of Time people, but you're just like, oh my god, they're so freaking petty and they love war, and you're like, please people, like, and okay, I'll just say like, okay, what else do I love? What else I love about Stormlight Archives? So you have this big world, you have like world-ending stuff happening. Like there's the big adventure stories. But I feel like the main focus of Stormlight Archive is the characters. Oh, the characters, I love them. I'm obsessed with them. I love them. And there's so much good character growth, like they actually grow from book 1 to book 4, like, and the whole point of like some of the magic system is you have to grow as a person to get higher in this magical system, which is about being radiant. And being radiant is when you are linked to a spren, like not like rain spren or anything, but different kinds of special spren will like befriend you and like be a part of you, and then through them you get magical powers. But you have to grow as a person, and essentially this spren is your therapist. Because I would say a lot of the character stuff is really like mental health. Like you have all these characters are basically, they're having to face their trauma, have to deal with it, have to grow from it, have to heal, and you're just like, I love this, it's beautiful. I'm crying. Like at book 4, I literally cried when Shannon did a whole breakthrough. So I'll quickly go over the 3 main characters, but I really love the spren friends. My favorite is Patton, who's Shannon's. He's hilarious, and why I recommend the audiobook read by Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, because Kate Redding does Patton's voice. I laugh out loud every time. He's amazing. I love him. But also, okay, so we have 3 main point of view characters, and then you have a bunch of other characters. Then you have interludes with randoms. Then you have flashbacks, and there's everything in these books. The last one's 45 hours long, okay? So there's a lot. These books are big. But I love them. So the 3 main characters I'll talk about and get a little chance. So the main thing is the story starts. There are 2 prologues, one's like ages away, but like the main story starts with, I don't think it's a spoiler, I think this is on like the blurb of the book, but basically the king of the Alethi is assassinated and everything goes down. Everything goes crazy from there. And so our first point of view is Dalinar. And he is the brother of the king. He's a middle-aged man with adult kids, Adolin and Renarin, who also, you get their points of views later. Not so much Renarin, but I think there might be more of him later. But Adolin is a grown puppy dog man. And I love him. But I also love Dalinar because he's kind of complex. You know, for a middle-aged man, he has a lot of demons, a lot of trauma and bad stuff in his life, and he was actually drunk when his brother was assassinated, and he carries a lot of guilt of not being able to help him, of being a drunk. He was drunk for other traumatic past reasons, which we do find out. I think it was Oathbringer is where we really get Dalinar's backstory and everything that happened to him, and what he did. Like, it was bad stuff. He was not a good person as a young man. But the point is, he faces that, he realizes it, he deals with he becomes sober, he struggles with that. And then, so this is a world that gets like constant huge storms called high storms. And I think they always go from east to west. Pretty sure they always go one direction. And then later on you get like this opposite storm that gets created that goes the opposite way and screws everything up, because the whole society is built on east to west storms. Anyway, during these storms that always happen, and they're very destructive, so you have to be sheltered, he starts getting visions, and they're freaky. So that's kind of Dalinar. I really enjoy him. I enjoy Dalinar. He has some epic dang moments. And I'm just going to say one word here, which if you read the books, you know, and if you haven't, you won't know. So it's not a spoiler, but the perpendicularity. That part of the books, oh, The perpendicularity. Anyway, I do love Oathbringer. I put all 4 of the books as my favorite because I read them back to back to back, and I freaking love all of them. So, all equally, I think they're all good. I know some people didn't like the 4th book as much, but I did. So, and then the second point of view character is Shallan. She is a young woman who, when we meet her, she's out on her own, away from her family, away from her country. So she's not a Lethe. She's from another country, and she is tracking down this Alethi. Well, she's tracking down Yasna, who was Yasna's a bad bitch. I love her. I love Yasna so much. But we'll go into that in a second. But she's tracking her down because she wants to be like her lady, like, I don't know, be mentored by, I can't remember the word specifically. She wants to be mentored by her, and Yasna's like kind of making her chase her. So, but Meteor trying to trace her down. And a lot of people hate Shallan. They find her really annoying. And I find that offensive. First of all, the only main female point of view character is the one you don't like. I'm not to you. And also, like, she's a legitimate girl. Like, she's a teenage girl. She has issues. And she has a lot of issues. And I love her because she is an amazing artist. I wouldn't say I'm amazing, but she has so much better artistry. Like, she can literally look at something and then, like, take a picture with her mind and then perfectly draw it. Wish that was me. But she's an artist. But she's also super into history and science. And that's why she hooks up with Yasna, because Yasna is an historian. She's a historian who's an atheist. So like Shallan and Yasna together, I was like, it's me. It's me. And I loved it. So Yasna's a Lethe, and they're very religious. And they really don't like that their princess is an atheist. She's very outspoken. I will say, like, Brando is a Mormon who believes in God. Like, I think he's a more progressive Mormon, and he's definitely, like, gotten better. I think he's very open-minded, so he's learning, all right? That's fair enough. But I didn't know that when I first read these books, because he writes atheists so well. Like, so well. Like, amazing. They have amazing arguments. I'm just like, yes. And he doesn't, like, put them down. Like, he's like, this is who they are. This is what they believe. Nothing wrong with that. And I'm like, I get you, dude. I love it. You write a great atheist. So that's Shallan, and there's a lot of stuff about Shallan, okay? Like, this might be the start of a story, but it's not what seems. Also, what really comes out, I don't think this is a spoiler, this might be a draw for you, but essentially a lot of what he discusses in this character is mental health. And Shallan has dissociative identity disorder, or as it used to be called, multiple personalities. She suffers with DID because she had a lot of childhood trauma, and she created like these alters in her mind, which is, this is real. Not everybody. I feel like it's still pretty rare, but so I don't know about the people on YouTube, to be honest, but people in this world do live with that, and they create these other people in their mind to take these trauma memories and keep them from them, and so it keeps them safe. And so this is what's happened to Shallan, and Brando does actually consult with DID experts to make sure it's a good representation and it's respectful, and it is, honestly. Like, yeah, there's a whole thing in book 4 that makes me cry. It's so beautiful and sad, and basically she has to deal with all that trauma. Like, that's the end goal, honestly. So there's a lot there for Shallan. And then finally, oh my god, we're almost at an hour. Probably long ago I gave up my reading journal stuff because I'll be done in no time. So now you're just listening to me talk about books. Anyway, if you wanted a long video of this PLANMAS, this is it. Finally, the third point of view. I just burped. I'm so disgusting. Anyway, I swear I'm very sober, but I've only had coffee today, so. we'll get this done. We'll talk about Kaladin, the last character, the last big point of view, and he's kind of like, I think he's really the main character, Kaladin. When we meet him, he is a young Alethi man who has been enslaved. He was in an army, and then the army put him into slavery. Once again, I'm just like, rage. And at the point that we meet him, he's kind of given up. He's about to be sold to a different army, but he's been through a few different people, owners. And every single time he's tried to get everybody to run, and they escape, and people get killed because of him and recaptured and killed, and he's like always the survivor, and he has a lot of guilt for that, and he has a lot of guilt of pre-slavery stuff. So, you know, all these characters are messed up. They're messed up, and they get through it. They become better people, and they succeed, and you love it. You root for them, you know? And so, yeah, and he gets put into this, it's called Bridge Crew. So there's a big war against, of all the Alethi against the people they think assassinated their king. And these wars are done on plateaus with chasms beneath. It's a very cool, like, world. And so he's part of this Bridge Crew. Bridge 4, yeah, holla. We love Bridge 4. And they hold bridges and they run them and they put the bridges over the chasm so the army can get across. And it's a death sentence. It's the bottom of the bottom. He's at the bottom of life forever. Not forever, but, you know, he's at the bottom because they have to do the bridges right when they get to the enemy. And so they become the main target for the enemy at first before the army can cross the chasm. So it's basically a death sentence, and everyone's given up in the Bridge Crew, including Kaladin. So he's basically a sad boy. He's like, his mental illness is really depression, and he struggles through the whole series, and you're just like, I love you, my Kaladin. I love you. Anyway, feelings. I think there's the thing with Brando is that he gives you feelings about these characters. I just love them all. And his writing, as I said previously, I love poetic, flowery prose, and his writing is very straightforward. It's a lot of he said, she said. Like, he's not too descriptive. You kind of just go with the flow, which is great for the audiobooks, honestly, because sometimes they're so long, there are parts where I kind of just like drifted away. And then I came back to it, and that's okay. I feel like it was easier to read that way rather than trying to like read every page, on a physical book, trying to read all the words. Whereas in an audiobook, you can like check out a little bit if you're not quite into this section. And that's okay, you don't really miss out on anything. So I find it a lot easier with the audiobook. There's also tons of interludes of lesser characters. So one of the interludes is Lift, she actually has a novella that happens between book 3 and 4. And I highly recommend you read the novella, Edge Dancer. Lift is amazing. I love her. Her main goal in life is to steal and eat people's lunch. She just wants to eat food. And I'm like, I get you, Lift. I get you. She's awesome. So she becomes like a main character, more of a main character in book 4, which is why she got a novella to flesh her out beforehand. So I highly recommend reading that. It's really cute. But then there are some interludes where it's like literally people you will never see again, but they're on like, you see another part of the world and what's happening in this world. And there's a really cute one with 2 academics, and one of them is really into like romance books, and the other one finds out and starts teasing them, but they actually also love romance books. And it's just a cute little scene. Oh, adorable. And I will say, Brando's sense of humor is silly. He is very silly. Like, okay, one of the funniest and most iconic lines of all the books is, I am a stick. I am a stick. Like, the way Kate Redding reads it, I laughed so hard out loud. Like, I am a stick. And these are all pattern lines, okay? But also when he says, no mating. This might sound ridiculous, but it's so cute and funny. funny. And then I love when he goes into, so he's usually like a little blob. He's usually like weird disconnecting lines, which is why he's called Pattern. But they go into this spirit, it's called Shadesmar, and it's where all the spirits live when they're not chilling out on Earth as little dudes. And so they're actually like proper people in this Shadesmar area, part of the magical fantasy. And when you go into this realm, he's like, he has a body, and he's like, look, I have fate. And I'm just like, oh, Miss Darling Fate. I have too many feels. I have too many feels about these books. And I'm not even talking about like the big stuff with like Odium and the Stormfather. Oh my god, the Stormfather's hilarious. If you know, he gets bullied by Dalinar, and I love it. But then there's a whole thing with, there's whole lots of stuff and history and thousands of years. And also, okay, I gotta add one more thing, is that you have these bad people, but then you get point of view chapters about them. So it's two characters, Eshonai and, oh my god, what's her name? I forgot her other name, and she's a bigger character than Eshonai. Oh my gosh. Anyway, starts with a V, I think. Venli, oh my god. Eshonai and Venli, who are sisters and part of the bad people, and then you get their point of views, and you're like, okay, this is way more grey than I thought. So there's no like, I guess there's bad, but not so much yet. Not what we think and not what the characters think, and I love it. I kind of love like, it's not so straightforward. It's a lot more complex world, and you get points of views with the bad people, like the enemy, and you're like, okay, I'll see what you're doing there, Brando. And I'm loving it. So I'm really looking forward to book 5. I'm definitely going to read all 4 of them again before that book comes out. I think it's like 2 years until he finishes, until it comes out, but he only just started writing it. And I think he's got like 10% done. But Brando is like, if you don't know him, he's a machine. He can write. He also keeps everyone updated on weekly updates on his YouTube channel. And yeah. Oh, also, we invested in his Kickstarter for his 4 secret project books. So we're getting all 4 of those next year. So that'll be fun. A lot more Brando next year. But I will say, I'm just like, I really love the Stormlight Archive. It is honestly up there with Tolkien for me. It's a lot more, it's a modern fantasy, like, as in, the way it's written is modern, and I love how there's no like dragons and the usual stuff that you see in like medieval themed, like it's still like, there's still not a lot of technology. Like they have horses and stuff, but they also have giant crabs and crab dogs and stuff. And then also, it's 1 hour, but I really have to talk about Navani, okay? Okay, finally, because there's other characters who get point of view, and she gets a huge point of view chapters. She's a big main character in book 4. Navani is she's the wife of the assassinated king, so she's Queen Mother. Her son becomes king, and she's a middle-aged woman with adult children, and she gets a huge point of view in book 4, and I just love that. Like I know Brando said, the first fantasy he ever read was about a middle-aged woman with a kid, and it was completely different. Like he never knew this stuff when he was a 13-year-old boy. And I love how he brought that into his own books. It's like this, oh, she's such a badass. Like she's a middle-aged woman of color. Alethi people have dark brown skin and black hair. The only actual white Europeans are from Shinovar, and we only have 1 character from them so far. Everyone else is sort of POC, or they have different kind of features in European. So anyway, oh my god, I love her and her growth. So she really loves inventing and science, but she's always seen herself as like, I'm not smart enough to do that. I'm a patron. I'm not a smart inventor herself, but she is. And the growth is that she realizes this, she realizes her self-worth, and I'm just like, yes, Navani, you are smart, you are capable, you are strong, you're a badass, you're an amazing inventor. Oh my god. I love it. I love the women in these books. So, yeah. I just had to do one last thing about Navani because she gave me so many feels in book 4. I love her. She's so great. Anyway, and in the first book, you do meet her, and she's like really aggressively trying to go after Dalinar. So in the Alethi world, like, because she married Dalinar's brother, Dalinar is considered her brother, even though her husband has died. He's still considered like family. And she's like, Dalinar's hot, man. I'm into him. And Dalinar's like, I'm into her, but I also know Alethi rules. And then he had this sort of like, will they, won't they? Like, are they just going to finally get together? Please. Please. And I won't spoil it for you, but that's really fun in the beginning. And she's just like aggressive. And I'm like, get him, girl. Get him. Get him. Anyway. Now I've ranted on about books for an hour. I'm sorry. I'm sorry this is so long, but we're literally talking about a whole year's worth of books. But if you're interested, next year I can do like, I probably wouldn't do monthly because I only read like 2 or 3 books a month at most when I'm being good. But maybe quarterly I could do, like every 3 months actually, I could do a what I've been reading video like this. If you're interested, let me know, and then it won't be an hour long like next PLANMAS if I'm doing it. So let me know. But I enjoyed sitting here for an hour and talking about the books that I read. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed me setting up those pages in my reading journal, which are probably long done because I kept going on, but I needed to get all the feels out. And then you can see what I've been reading and what kind of books I read, I guess. I think overall, I'm just really into fantasy right now. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'm so glad I tried out Brandon Sanderson. I just really enjoyed it. He works for me, okay? Like, he doesn't literally work for me, but his writing works for me. So, yeah, that's it. I'm going to stop blabbering now. I'm going to let you go. Do your business. Do whatever you're doing. But I hope you have a wonderful day. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And I'll see you tomorrow for another PLANMAS video. I don't think there's many other 1-hour videos during PLANMAS. I know the haul on Christmas Day is, but I think this is it. So I hope that was okay for you. But otherwise, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget, I love you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.